One of the more provocative statements of yours that I've read is that if the standards apply to the Nuremberg trials, were applied, then every post-World War II American president would have been hanged as a war criminal. Take us briefly through the war crimes committed by each president.
Yeah, I've done this in print a couple of times, but with Truman, you can start with he came shortly after he came into office. There was the bombing of Hiroshima, which maybe one can give some kind of an argument for, although I don't think so. But it's just about impossible to give an argument for the bombing of Nagasaki. That was mostly just trying out a new weapon to see how many, if it would work. Then there was another utterly gratuitous bombing, 1,000-plane raid at the end of the war, right? In fact, after Japan surrendered, called a finale, and kind of grand finale. Then comes, for example, the support for a brutal counterinsurgency campaign in Greece, which killed about 150,000 people to basically restore Nazi collaborators and demolish the resistance. And then we can go on from there. The Eisenhower administration, Truman and Eisenhower administration, the bombings in whatever you think about the Korean War, and there's a pretty complicated story when you really look, but take whatever you believe. Nevertheless, the bombing of North Korea by, say, 1951 and 1952 was just an outright war crime. In fact, you can read in the Air Force history about how in the Eisenhower years they had nothing left to bomb. Everything was flat, so they just bombed dams, which and they exult about how wonderful it was to see all the water flooding down and killing people and wiping out the crops and so on. Well, people were hanged for that at Nuremberg. For less than that, they were hanged for opening dikes at Nuremberg. And again, we can proceed. What happened in Guatemala and elsewhere was a terrible crime in the Eisenhower years. And Kennedy, it's not even worth discussing. I mean, the invasion of South Vietnam, Kennedy attacked South Vietnam outright in 1961-62, sent the U.S. Air Force to start bombing villages, authorized napalm, also laid the basis for the huge wave of repression that spread over Latin America with the installation of neo-Nazi gangsters, always supported directly by the United States, went on and in fact picked up under Johnson. In the Nixon years, for example, the bombing of Inner Cambodia in 1973 was a monstrous crime. It was just massacring peasants in Inner Cambodia. It isn't much reported here because nobody paid attention, but it was quite apart from helping set the base, create the basis for the Khmer Rouge. The CIA's estimate is that 600,000 people were killed in the course of those U.S. actions, either directed or actually carried out by the United States. In the Carter years, there were major crimes. For example, the Indonesian invasion of East Timor, which happened to start under Ford and led to the nearest thing to genocide since the Holocaust. Maybe a third or a quarter of the population has been slaughtered. That was 90% with using 90% U.S. arms. In the Carter years, when the Indonesians were actually running out of arms in their attack on this country, Carter actually increased the flow of arms in 1978, which was the worst peak of slaughter. Carter was backing Somoza and his National Guard, and openly and with direct military and diplomatic support at a time when they had killed about 40,000 people in the terror of the last days of their regime. Going on, again, that's a sample. Going on to the Reagan years, it's not even a question. In fact, the U.S. was condemned by the World Court during the Reagan years for its unlawful use of force meaning aggression in Nicaragua. In Central America alone, maybe 200,000 people or so were slaughtered in a very brutal fashion by U.S.-run programs. In Southern Africa, about a 1.5 million people were killed, and over $60 billion of damage were done, according to the UN Commission, which reviewed it later, from 1980 to 1988. That's from South African atrocities, which the U.S. was directly supporting. And again, we can go on. That includes, Bush, well, we've already talked about him, but the invasion of Panama, for example, which was simply outright aggression. In fact, condemned internationally. The U.S. was able to veto the Security Council condemnations, but that didn't change the fact that they were there, too, in fact. When we move on to the Clinton years, one of his first acts within a few months was to send missiles to bomb Baghdad. Well, he didn't kill a huge number of people, only, I think, 8 or so. But attacking, and it was absolutely no pretext. It wasn't even a pretext. It was to show what a tough guy he is. In fact, the pretext was so ludicrous, it's embarrassing to repeat it. The pretext was that this was self-defense against armed attack. Because 2 months earlier, there had been a failed attempt by someone who might or might not have been Iraqi, nobody knew at the time, to kill, Bush or something like that. That's just not even ridiculous. About half of military aid to Central America, to Latin America, under Clinton, military aid and training was going to Colombia, which has absolutely the worst human rights record in the hemisphere, killing thousands of people in a horrifying fashion. These are all crimes.